Hello there lads, Jim Tiger here. Today I am going to be telling you a little bit about what it is like to do Fulbright in Taiwan. Now this is going to be largely an informational video because I am going to be trying to provide a legitimate perspective and help you out if you are a prospective person applying for Fulbright, you already got it, trying to figure out if you want it and all of that. So I divide it into sections that I will label as well to help you if you want to skip around and whatnot. So let's just jump right into it. The first thing is going to be the language barrier and the culture shock. So basically, when I first got here, I actually did have a basis in Mandarin Chinese. Now, I'm far from fluent.
你好，现在我拍 YouTube 的影片。
At least I certainly was at that time. And I really had not ever used it in any kind of a practical setting. However, coming here definitely helped knowing some Chinese. I will say, basically no one here speaks English unless you're living in one of the really big cities. Now, a lot of Taiwan is a big city in a sense, but I'm referring to Taipei or Kaohsiung as like the two biggest cities where people actually speak a bit of English, especially in Taipei. If you're outside of those areas, as a lot of people are, people don't really speak English. Now that is actually a good thing in my opinion because I wanted to come and practice my Chinese, so I definitely got the opportunity to do that, and I think I feel really good about how that's gone, and my Chinese at this point is honestly somewhere near a degree of conversational fluency, I would say.
现在我拍 YouTube。
But I definitely think it helps to know some Chinese, or if you don't know any coming in, that's okay. Maybe brush up on a little bit and try and learn some. And if you really don't want to, I know plenty of people here who don't speak any Chinese, and to be honest, I think that's a little bit weird of a decision to make, but it's not like you need to know any. So the next part of this is the culture shock. Now, so it might just be shocking for one thing, to be honest, that you're somewhere where people aren't speaking English. People aren't speaking the same language that you're accustomed to speaking and hearing your entire life. As is a common thread with living abroad and all these kind of things here, you do get used to it. Like, I feel very comfortable being in public and everyone around me speaking Chinese. Like, I feel like it's strange almost if everyone around me is speaking English because I'm not used to that at this point almost. And it helps again that because I hear it all the time, can actually understand it decently well. So it's not even just like as alienating as it perhaps once was too, where you're out in public and you can't even understand a lick of what other people are saying around you. I can actually overhear it kind of like normal conversations, and you know, it's a bit more normal, a bit better. But culture shock definitely exists because things are of course very different from the US in almost every single way. US is massive, Taiwan is very small. Even just prices of things and certainly the way that people act, you know, the language they're speaking, as I said, the transportation methods, basically everything you can imagine is different. But that is again cool and interesting and definitely something fun to embrace. Now we'll get into the specifics of all that stuff in the other sections basically. So moving on to section 2, we're going to talk about transportation. So transportation wise, I will say Taiwan is very good. Now some people like to slam the US for having pretty bad public transportation, and to be honest, I mean it does, but at the same time it's because the US is massive. I mean, what are you going to do? Put in like an extensive train and bus network to every single, like, it doesn't really make sense, you know? In Taiwan, you have incredibly limited space, and not only is the space incredibly limited, you know, throw a map, I don't care, open my face, whatever, the entire central part of the island is just mountains. On the western coast, you have a basically continuous megacity where there is just buildings and things, so obviously there's an extensive train network going there. There's even an HSR, that means high-speed rail network going along there. It's a bit more expensive, but very quick. And then you can take trains even to the East Coast, which is not super developed, but you can even get there via trains, do whatever. And then buses take you to a bunch of different places, so you don't even really need your own method of transportation to a degree. However, Fulbright actually does help you to get your scooter license. Unless you're in Taipei, I believe they don't actually want you to have a scooter in Taipei because it's so busy and dangerous and they have their own metro network, so whatever. But Fulbright actually helps you to get a scooter because for most people, you actually need to get to work by yourself, of course. And you can try and take buses and maybe your coworkers will even help drive you, but it's gonna be a bit of a challenge, and it's much easier if you can just be independent and take yourself and then go places with friends, do whatever. So they'll help you get your scooter license, which is like a very low grade motorcycle. Now, if you're thinking I've never ridden a motorcycle thing in my life, that's fine, basically none of us have. It's not super difficult, and they basically help train you a little bit and help you take the test. So not help you during it, but they prepare you for it and whatnot. So I passed, got my license, ended up buying a scooter, an electric scooter, because I didn't want to pollute. A little more expensive, but get it secondhand, not too bad. And that's definitely been a very nice thing to have. I liked biking a lot.
Flying down this road later is actually gonna be terrifying.
Holy shit, dude. I will say the air pollution down here in the south of Taiwan where I am gets a bit severe, especially in the winter months, so scootering has definitely been a blessing. But public transportation and scootering can take you basically anywhere you need to go. The whole central part of the island being mountains, you can scooter around there for sure. I've done it plenty of times, but I know a lot of other people, A, don't like to be on a scooter for that long, or B, are scared of those mountain roads, and that's legitimate. So those areas are a bit less accessible to be sure, but if you're not as adventurous, you probably don't want to go there anyway, so not a big deal. Section 3, we're going to discuss the food. So the food is a thing I'm going to give you other people's perspective on. Basically for me, I am a vegetarian, so the options here are not great, to be honest. If you like meat, I've heard the food in Taiwan is actually very good. You'd be surprised at how little fish there is unless you're in certain areas where they like heavily go on it when they're really close to the coast, fishing areas. But usually, to be honest, it's just a crap ton of meat, like land, terrestrial meat, bovine, what have you. So there's a lot of meat here, but I've heard the food is actually good if you like that. So yeah, and the food is very cheap. That brings us to section 4, which is pay compensation. So Fulbright Taiwan, specific about them, they give you a stipend. If you are an ETA, an English teaching assistant, I believe, you get 40,000 NTD a month. That probably translates to about $1,300 or so, but the conversion is not super important because the price range is just obviously very different. That might not sound like a lot to live off of here, but everyone who has that salary lives very comfortably, does not really think too much about their pay, is not going out and, I shouldn't buy this, shouldn't do that, I shouldn't travel. You can travel every weekend, you can go do what you want, you can pay for food, and it's very comfortable actually on that salary. And if you're an ETF, which is usually second year, but I'm actually a weird situation of first year ETF, so that does happen, you can get 50,000 NTD per month, which is like 1,600 USD, and obviously just a nice little bit of extra padding and whatnot. That's nice to have. So the pay is actually quite comfortable. You can pay for anything really you might imagine and really not be limited, and you can travel all you want. We'll talk about travel a little bit later as well. Shoo! Teaching. So obviously the actual teaching itself is very important. So a lot of places in Taiwan have it where you actually have 2 schools. So I think that's pretty evenly mixed with just one. So 2 of my best friends just have one school. They go to Monday through Friday, as you might expect, and they love that actually. They have a very tight connection with the kids. They're like a true member of the staff. They can get really involved, plan a curriculum, bring their own ideas to the table, go to all their school's events. Down here in the south and in many other places, you have 2 schools, which means that you have a split in the days and you basically are a little bit torn in 2 different directions. I will say it's still very good, of course, and I feel very connected to all my kids and schools anyway. But for example, tomorrow is a sports day for one of my schools where they all have like a big field day competition, and all the kids are like, "Oh, are you going? Are you going?" And I'm like, I can't. I have the other school that I have to go to, so you can't really attend all the events you want, whatnot, whatever. But I will say that is more severe in Pingdong because if you are here, you have a little special extra situation called tour schools, where Fridays you do a rotating going to different schools thing. That basically means in a given week you're actually going to 3 different schools. So it can be a bit much, especially because you can't actually give everyone your full time and attention, basically, more or less. But it's still fantastic and I do really enjoy it, of course. It should also be said that it depends for the teaching if you have elementary school versus like junior high students. So for me, I teach elementary school, that is typically 3rd grade through 6th grade, and I love it. I think it's awesome. They're very young and innocent, but they're old enough past like 2nd grade, so they can actually speak a little bit of English, and you can communicate with them that way. However, I will say, me knowing Chinese has been a big blessing there because I can actually form a real relationship with my kids and talk with them since their English is obviously incredibly limited. If you can only speak English, you will still have a good relationship with them. You'll have fun with them, do whatever, mess around, but you're not going to have a super deep relationship. I know a buddy who does not speak Chinese with his elementary school kids, and he says it is a little bit limiting. However, if you're teaching junior high, I know a couple of people who don't speak any Chinese to their kids, even though they speak Chinese, because their kids' English is so good at that point that it really does not matter, actually. So that's been a really interesting thing, and if you don't speak any Chinese, maybe you should look at being junior high teacher instead, because you can kind of choose after you find out which county you're placed in. You can choose which schools you want or tell them your preferences at the very least. Those are actually all the main sections I wanted to do because I'm trying to basically give you a nice little bullet points thing, but I'm going to talk just a little bit about some quick culture notes. So I just want to say, you are a foreigner, you are a Waiguoren, Waigoren, that means foreigner. That means I said that so badly. Foreigner, that's what that means. And it is definitely something you will hear in public. If you don't speak Chinese, you'll learn that phrase anyway. Because everyone just sees you, oh, Waigoren, like, there's no foreigners here. In the US, you see people of all different kinds of races, ethnicities, creeds, colors, etc. And you don't really think twice about it. You're just like, yeah, it's a person. You know, you don't assume they're not from the US. There's a lot of diversity, honestly, in a lot of areas in the US. In Taiwan, everyone is Taiwanese, basically. And that can include kind of people from mainland China or like the indigenous populations, but that's the only sort of variation you get. And if you don't look like those two populations, which the vast majority of any foreigner does not, they just single you out. And the nice thing I will say is that you have like foreigner status. So it's not a bad singling out. It can feel a little othering and a little bit uncomfortable sometimes because they're just staring at you like this, but you get used to it. And the thing is, they actually like you a lot. People are very friendly and they'll be like, oh, hello. They'll try to talk to you a little bit in English. If they can know like any English, they'll try. So that is definitely a benefit, is that even though it's very othering, it can be a little weird actually, for sure, you get very used to it, and it's actually coming from a good place. They're just surprised to see a foreigner. They just not used to it, so they're just like, how cool, this is so weird. So they kind of freak out and stare at you, and kids don't even know how to react. So that's something you will just have to get used to, though. And then to mention the indigenous people, there are about 14 or so tribes in Taiwan of indigenous people, and it's very interesting and very cool. And a lot of people's schools, myself included actually, if you're in certain areas, especially outside of the cities, you might be in some indigenous schools. So you might get very acquainted with some local tribes, which can be very cool. I teach in Taiwanese and Lukai tribes. They speak their own languages, they have their own culture. It is very cool, very interesting to see, and I definitely recommend checking out that when you are in Taiwan. Quick little travel notes. So the island is obviously very, very small. Now, I will say, I've done what I believe to be basically the most traveling any person has done in all of Fulbright Taiwan this year. Every single weekend I've gone somewhere. I've gone somewhere new. I've done all these crazy things. My Google Maps kind of thing, throw a picture actually, is completely pinned up. And I haven't even pinned everywhere by any stretch, but that is just a lot of the places I've been to. And basically, I've been to everywhere in Taiwan you can kind of go to at this point. So a year here, in my opinion, is a pretty perfect amount of time. I'm quite used to it at this point. I'm quite enjoying it, but I'm also ready to go home, feeling a little bit stir crazy on the island because I have kind of just run out of options of places to go and kind of things to do. But it is definitely very cool, and honestly, it's a very manageable size and a good size for a year to be able to check out all kinds of different places and still feel like you hit everything up by the end of it. Honestly, guys, that's basically all that I have for you. I was just trying to give you a pretty quick little bullet points thing just to give you some information about it. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to send me an email or just drop a comment down below. I would love to answer it, ask me any specific questions, any further follow-up things you would like. But I just wanted to give you as much information as possible in as little time as possible so that it's manageable and nice for you, since I'm sure you are a busy person. Now, anyway, I really much appreciate you watching, and definitely please sure to subscribe and leave a like and a comment because it really does help. All right, I'll see you next time. Take care.